All right, the work session of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of River Edge will now come to order. It is Monday, October 15th at approximately 7 p.m. The adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by sending notices to the Bergen Record and the Ridgewood News, by positioning the same on the bulletin board in the lobby of the Borough Hall, and by filing notice with the municipal clerk. I'd like to remind the public that we have 3 exits in council chambers, and we are on the record. We're being recorded both for audio and video. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilwoman Murphy?
Here.
Councilman Ford?
Here.
Councilman Coppola?
Here.
Councilman Rizzo?
Here.
Councilman Guadalupe?
Here.
Councilman Papaleo?
Here.
And Mayor Mascarpolo?
Present. All right, we have 3 borough administrator topics. Alan, the first one's professional service contracts.
Mayor, thank you. If I may, we were asked to list this item to have a discussion among the council members as to whether the process for appointment of professionals would change next year. In the past, we have done a non-fair and open process with regard to pay to play. The mayor and council have basically solicited their proposals and then reached a consensus decision on the appointment of professionals for the new year. Last year, in certain instances, we did do some RFPs where we had those professionals that were vacant or new to the position. So I'm just seeking guidance from the council on what you would like us to do or not do this for the 2013 year.
Anybody have a comment or a statement they'd like to make? No?
We could follow our traditional process then.
I'd keep the same process in place.
Okay.
I think we need, well, I think if we do, we need to make sure we're covering all our professionals again, because I think we still have to go back and look at the redevelopment attorney, the planners, and everything else. We didn't do those through the same process last time. We did those through a fair and open process.
Mayor, I might suggest that we do have a contracts committee. They could deliberate over these positions and then provide the full council with their recommendations, as to these specific RFPs.
Who's on the contracts committee?
Denise, do you have the contracts committee?
Who's on the contract?
Would probably be Tom,
Not me.
Kathleen, and
No, not.
I'm not on it now.
I'll be on it.
it's those that know. It's those that are
It's
not on
already
the personnel
set.
subcommittee,
Right.
usually are on the contracts.
That's why I thought you guys were personnel, so you would be on it with
And I thought we weren't on it.
They're usually not.
I mean, I don't mind doing it.
Kathleen, I can look it up.
All right, why don't we look it up and
All
get
right.
back to the council?
All right, number 2, Alan, is the draft ordinance to amend our fee schedule.
Yes, Mayor, we provided the council at the last work session with the draft fee ordinance. So we're looking for guidance on the changes that we're recommending. First one is the police outside duty, just no change there, clarification of $135 per hour. We have 2 towing application changes as recommended by the police department, increasing the police officer application fee gradually 2013 through 15 based on cost of living adjustments for our personnel, a commuter parking fee increase for 2013, which hasn't been done in several years, and a banner fee change as recommended by a former property maintenance officer.
Was the banner fee $25?
He had recommended between 15 and 25. We had done 15 at the time, but our hourly rates are now, closer to the $20 range. So anything $20 to 25 would be appropriate in my estimate, my opinion.
Would anybody like to make a motion to amend the proposed fee ordinance regarding fees for banners?
I
Do we
make a
have number?
motion to amend the fee ordinance to increase the fee to $25.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Can I have a roll call?
Councilwoman Murphy?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Councilman Coppola?
Yes.
Councilman Rizzo?
Yes.
Councilman Guadalupe?
Yes.
Councilman Papaleo?
Yes.
All right, are there any other proposed changes in this fee ordinance? Is there a motion to put it on the agenda for first reading?
I'll make a motion to put it on the agenda for the first reading.
All right.
Second.
Can I have a roll call to put it on the agenda for first reading formally adopted.
Councilwoman Murphy?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Councilman Capola?
Here.
Councilman
Yes.
McDowell?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm still here.
Councilman Signal?
Yes.
Councilman Bottaloni?
Yes.
And Councilman Cavaleo?
Yes.
All right, very good.
Mayor, just point of clarification, so that would be the rest of the items as recommended?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and the third one was Chief Caridi to discuss Kinderkamak Road pedestrian signage, speed limits, and pedestrian safety.
Quick.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
Okay, Chief?
Mayor, if I may, we have two resolutions on tonight, which the chief is here to address. One is the stanchions for Kinnickinnick Road, and the other is the reduction of the speed limit. So,
Right.
Chief, with that, I think we're looking for your viewpoint on those two resolutions that have been drafted.
Where are they, let's see. Are they here in front of me?
Resolutions?
Yeah. Okay. Chief, do you have the proposed resolution?
Yes.
For the pedestrian stanchion 12-366? You have that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 crosswalks. Do you have any comments, recommendations, suggestions on these locations, these particular crosswalks?
Depending on where they're placed, and I know this proposal has expanded since it was first brought up, and additional locations were added to it. With respect to Kinderkamak, one of the problems that we have is that of width on the roadway. I know a lot of people in River Edge are familiar with the pedestrian stanchions that exist in other towns, especially just north of us in Oradell. One of the concerns that I have involves the available width on Kinnickinnick Road, coupled with both north and southbound traffic, as well as bus stops, traffic having to move around them, and then potentially being confronted with striking a pedestrian stanchion as well. Going back about 5 or so years ago, 2006, 2007, we did a study on placing stanchions at various locations, including Kinnickinnick Road in the area of the Madison Avenue crosswalk south of the post office, and we put traffic cones in the roadway. They were getting hit regularly by passing traffic at the same spot where a pedestrian stanchion would be. And then we added a police car to the area so that vehicular traffic would have the presence of a marked patrol unit to help add a little bit more caution around the signs, and they still kept getting hit. Our roadway at that location is about 34.5 feet wide, whereas in Kinnickinnick Road in Oradell, up by Jay's Pharmacy, it's 54 feet wide. One of the narrower portions on Kinnickinnick in the area of Charlie Brown's, just north of our border in Oradell, the roadway is about 44 feet wide. So that extra 10 feet makes a big difference in being able to have a stanchion there safely. That's my primary concern with respect to the stanchions, is that they may get hit by oncoming traffic and go into oncoming lanes of traffic and potentially create an accident. It's something that, if the county engineers, and I do understand they are willing to review this entire proposal again, including potential change to speed limits. The last time this was done by the county engineer's office was late 2008, and in order to be able to get a gauge on the speed. They set up on 4 different locations from the northern end of Kinnecmack Road to the Hackensack border, and on 4 different occasions, 4 different locations, using both day and night. They took traffic counts of, I believe, 100 vehicles at each of the locations. County police officers did the radar detail, and there was also a traffic counter that was put in place for overall traffic volume. The numbers that came out as a result of that study in 2008 indicated that the prevailing speed, they refer to it as the 85th percentile. It's not just the average speed, but the speed at which 85% of the traffic is traveling was just under the posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour. At night it was 35 or 36 miles an hour, and during the day it was 33 because of the increased volume. Something else if they're willing to do the study again, they'd be able to get updated figures that would be 4 years newer, and if they could also look at roadway width in addition to the traffic volume and relative speed, I think you'd be able to get a more comprehensive picture about where stanchions can be placed safely without contributing to any traffic issue.
Okay. Any questions for the chief?
So, what are you saying? The new proposed area is too much for, as far as, the whole objective was to slow the traffic down. By adding more spots, it's just too congested, as you were saying.
Well, what winds up happening, we have about close to 20,000 cars a day that travel on Kinnecmack Road. It's a very, as everyone in this room knows, it's a very heavily traveled roadway. And right now, this traffic speed in and of itself, based on the posted speed limit, it's just not an issue. There are times when you'll have a vehicle that's going above the speed limit, but it's generally in the early morning hours rather than when there's any congestion. If the county engineer's office agrees to any reduction in speed limit, they would also have to address, depending on how much the reduction is, if they went from 35 miles an hour to 30, or from 35 miles an hour to 25, they'd also have to take into consideration as part of their determination the timing of the traffic signals. That's all taken into account now. Some of the signals were retimed as of the southern part of the Kinnecmack Road improvement, and there was retiming done at that time because the roadway was made wider. So those are all factors that go into the timing of the light. How many cars, how wide the roadway is, and the prevailing speed. And that's timing that affects all the way up the Kinnecmack Road corridor into the Pascack Valley area. So these are all things that the traffic engineer's office would consider, and I'd be happy to work with them directly to communicate with them while they're doing this study and coming up with a proposal. I just want to make sure that they're taking into account the width of the roadway, especially with respect to any traffic stanchions. Slowing speed down somewhat would certainly make it easier for people to avoid hitting a stanchion. But what the county engineer mentioned to us in 2008 was it also causes a phenomenon called vehicle stacking, and that's when natural breaks in traffic that exist now are actually reduced by dropping the speed limit. So the existing traffic flow moves slower. There's a more continuous flow of traffic without natural breaks in that traffic. Pedestrians, when crossing a roadway at a non-signalized intersection like Madison, wait for that natural break in traffic to be able to cross safely. And one thing that the county engineer's office cautioned about in 2008 was that a speed reduction could cause traffic stacking, and what tends to happen is pedestrians then will opt to cross at an unsafe time to dart across traffic because they've been waiting too long. And it actually increases the risk of pedestrians being struck or killed. So that it is something they're well aware of. It's something they'll take into consideration. And I'll just see that it's, if they're, and my understanding is our department spoke with the county engineer's office within the last week, and they're willing to come out and conduct the studies again. And those are all issues I'll make sure are addressed in the study.
Yeah, Well, just because I think this whole discussion was, one, was to slow the traffic down because I think it was for business purposes. I think people just flying past our town too fast that we're not, one is just unsafe, and two was just trying to create, more of an optical, hey, listen, we're alive here and well, let's keep the businesses going. Where people just fly past our town as a go-through to get to the next area. Do you think this is worth all the trouble going through to change the speed limit?
I think when it comes down to the difference with the potential for increasing people frequenting different businesses, that's ultimately going to be a decision for the council. I can really address the safety issue. Obviously, and no one here, my feeling on this is no different than anyone else on the council. No one wants to see a safety hazard created for any reason. It's the first rule. You can't do anything to make the situation unsafe. So if that can be accommodated so that we're not creating any safety issue, either with traffic stanchions becoming an impediment to traffic flow, or removing natural breaks in traffic for pedestrians to cross safely, I have no objection to the overall speed limit. But just as long as everyone's aware presently, the average speed on Kindercamack isn't 45 or 50 or even 40. It's about 35 at night and 33 during the day. So to actually drop that to where cars are actually doing 20 or 25, it's not a small feat that the engineers are going to have to consider, and that involves timing of all of the traffic lights from Hackensack to Oradell. So, and that does have an impact then into Oradell itself. And I understand from the engineer's office there's still some ongoing issues involving the reduction in speed in Oradell. But Oradell did have a lot more room to deal with. They were able to put in a pedestrian island in the middle, painted, but it served as pedestrian island, and they were also able to allow for some additional parking, which, unfortunately, based on the width of Kindercamack Road and River Edge, we don't have that luxury.
Ed? Yeah, I spoke to the county engineer's office too, and they were very amenable to addressing, or at least redoing some of the studies to look at the speed limit. And what I talked about was looking at pedestrian safety globally, not just with stanchions, not just with crosswalks, maybe looking at countdown timers, looking at their long-term plans if they are going to widen, because they do have road widening easements up and down Kindercamack, but at least we can revisit this with them and see what their long-term plans are also, so we can put together a global set of improvements rather than just try to piecemeal things as we go along. They didn't have an issue with the stanchions. They mentioned what the chief said. There's certain clearance requirements. Their biggest concern was with parked cars, not so much the cars going up and down, but these are things that we could work out with them. So I think it would behoove us to meet with the county and then just get some discussions and some dialogue going. It'll benefit pedestrians and also can give us the added benefit of going down the pass by traffic.
There is a bus stop, like for example, right in the area of Madison, and when a bus is pulled over there heading northbound, with the width of the bus itself, there's only about 19 feet left from the end of the bus to the west curb line to allow 2 lanes of passing traffic. Now, if traffic stays behind the bus, they're allowed to pass when they're actually loading and unloading, discharging passengers. Once the bus starts to move into traffic, the bus has the right of way, and traffic isn't supposed to be passing at that time. So we took a measurement of the bus, firmly stopped, not moving back into the flow of traffic, and it left about 19 feet. So a traffic stanchion at that point would only be a couple of feet west of where the bus is actually parked. So some areas are worse than others. Some areas it probably can be done without a great problem. I did some research on the cost for the stanchions themselves. For the full stanchion with the more narrow base that can be epoxied and screwed into the roadway, as opposed to the wider profile that's potentially take up too much roadway, they're about $320 a piece for the full set with 2 signs, a post, and the base. We have enough in our present stock for 4 total stanchions, not 4 locations, but 4 individual posts. to accommodate this, we'd have to make an order, and the other base, in some locations, you could use a wider base. That brings the cost down to about $260 for an individual unit.
And while we're talking about the stanchions, after that last meeting, I had gotten contact of a resident who had some concerns about Midland, which is another county road.
Right.
And they were concerned about, I think there is a marked crosswalk in Midland and Bogart, and one, I guess, at Magnolia?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah.
There's one in Myrtle.
In Myrtle,
By the
Myrtle.
school, yeah, on Magnolia.
And there was some request whether they would consider putting stanchions there as well. So I said we'd have to look at the width and those other issues too.
Yeah,
But to me, those are that's a less traveled
Yeah.
road than Kinderkamack. But I wanted to, at least if we're going to talk county about Kinderkamack, it's another county road, add those two locations.
The additional problem in Midland and Myrtle, you have a T intersection there with a lot of turning traffic, especially in the mornings. Anybody that's been there at the 7:30 to 8 o'clock time frame when schools are letting in and people are on their way to work, it's one of our most congested intersections.
The concerns that were raised to me tend to be, I think, more in the afternoon time. That was what they were talking about, like after school. But again, these are just two occasions that brought to my attention, so I'd like to include them.
Chief, when a pedestrian walks into a marked crosswalk, traffic has to stop, is that not correct?
That's correct.
But when a pedestrian walks into a non-marked crosswalk, so when they step off the curb, traffic does not need to stop.
There's actually every intersection, as opposed to mid-block, is considered the same as if it's a crosswalk.
So they do have to
They
stop.
are supposed to stop. Mid-block, it's a different story.
Okay.
And that's why Department of Transportation, Department of Highway Transportation Safety is so opposed to mid-block crossings in general, even when they are painted. At that point, it does give the pedestrian more right-of-way, but as a motorist driving by, there's not an expectation.
Yes.
A motorist is supposed to expect that at any intersection, marked or unmarked, the pedestrian has the same right-of-way.
So, one of the things I'm curious about is, when I visit my family in Florida, crosswalks are so highly enforced that there's a real expectation that cars stop. I'm wondering where we are with our enforcement in River Edge. Do we periodically enforce? Do we target areas for enforcement of car stopping when pedestrians step into the walkway or at a corner stepping into the road?
That's a good question. There's actually an enforcement program. There's a whole protocol that goes with it for, it's actually called the Pedestrian Decoy Program. And it involves having plainclothes officers crossing at set locations, and then subsequently summons is being issued to any motorist who doesn't appropriately yield to that pedestrian. One of the problems that we have in River Edge, per se, and in many of the other small towns, is that a program like that, believe it or not, takes 6 officers. I know it seems ridiculous, and it did to me at first too, until I actually attended one of the classes and found out what went into it. And for safety purposes, so that again you're not contributing to a safety hazard, you don't want vehicles in a position where they're going to have to make U-turns to go after violators. So cars have to be set up at 2 locations, say for Kinderkamack Road northbound and southbound. Then you need officers to actually work as those who are the pedestrians doing the crossing, and then there's chase cars that are set up at either location if somebody gets past the immediate officer, so as not to create a traffic hazard. Altogether, for a detail to run like that, 6 cops are used, and that's according to state guidelines for that decoy program. Some of the larger towns, Paramus, Fort Lee, I know do them on a periodic basis. New Jersey itself suffers the same problem that New York State does. Too many people and not enough room, and the difference between there and say what often comes up. But you mentioned Florida. It's also happens in California, where there's a lot more attention given to the pedestrian, whereas you get into New York and New Jersey area, and pedestrians are often taking their life into their hands, and seemingly vehicles aren't yielding at all. It truly is a big problem. It's not just perception. It is a big problem, but it's difficult to combat. Something like that to be done at some key locations on certain roadways, especially the county roadways where they're predominantly an issue in River Edge, potentially could be done with the assistance of, say, the county police or another agency. We recently worked in cooperation with them to address a jaywalking problem where pedestrians were going mid-block down by one of the bars in the south end of town, and by having that influx of some extra manpower, it was beneficial.
Yes, because my feeling is, as a council person, I think the council in general, if not unanimously, we want to make it possible and safe for our residents to cross to our business district midtown. In addition to that, we really do want to make the two county roads safer. So, and my next question was going to be, since these are county roads, can't the six officer contingent be equally manned by the county? I'm also wondering, could we not do a 4-officer contingent and just not have chase cars? In other words, if the cars run the blockade, they run the blockade, and we issue a ticket by mail. Is that possible? Is that reasonable?
It's something that's got to be studied for each location. It's not something that's going to be very time-consuming or really in-depth before committing to a specific answer to the location. I don't want to say something and then have to retract it later. I'd like to look at an individual location, and I will look into that. And I'll look into some other parameters that might be done to reduce the numbers. I know they weren't looking at 6 officers for the detail to try and be overly heavy on officer safety. They were looking at the community at large so that there wasn't a negative impact on the safety of all the pedestrians, motorists, and as well as police officers that would be involved in the enforcement effort. But I'll see where it's, it's never been something that we've been able to do ourselves in total, but it doesn't mean that we can't investigate something like that for a practical purpose with the assistance of another agency. So.
Yes, I would appreciate if you did look into that, because I think, at least for my part, I don't want to speak for the rest of the council, safety is a major issue crossing to our business area in Central Town. And I also believe, I'd like to say for the record that if we could slow down Kennecott, since leaving Hackensack it's 25 miles an hour, going into Ordell it's 25 miles an hour. If we could slow it down, this would provide greater public safety and greater access to our business district. So I appreciate it.
And again, I'm not at all adverse to
No, I don't think you are.
anything. I just want to make sure that all of those issues, as again, I'm not espousing anything that the council is not. I know safety is all of our concern,
Yeah.
and I just want to ensure that that's done as part of the study.
Actually, if I may just ask one more question. I'm wondering, when you did the study with the cones, I'm wondering, and I'm thinking out loud, if I was moving north and I needed to get around, I might say, oh, it's a cone. But if I was moving north and I saw a stanchion, I would have a different attitude towards the obstacle. I think I would be, as a driver moving north or south, less inclined to challenge the stanchion, especially if it's bolted down, than a cone, which I know will move, okay? So what are your thoughts about that? Is the study with the cones, do you think, isn't it mitigated to its effectiveness as a towing tool, since cones, people know, will leave no damage to their car and they can move on?
Well, I think it is mitigated to a degree.
Yes.
But having said that, our cones got hit so regularly with such frequency that I couldn't see a significant reduction even if it was a stanchion. And along with that, we placed stanchions at other locations in town.
Yeah.
For example, they were at one time up by St. Peter's on 5th Avenue,
Yes.
where it's much wider
Yes.
and is actually a location that should be more fitting for the placement of stanchions there without too much of a concern about them being struck. And they were struck regularly there also. As they were we put them in mid-block crossing on Continental. We do it every year for the summer camp. Because we have a crossing guard at that location, that truly mitigates the speed to a greater degree, so we don't lose as many there.
Mm-hmm.
We use stanchions at Continental and Bogart, another narrow roadway because of the school crossing at that intersection of Continental and Bogart, and they didn't survive either. And that's another narrow stretch.
I don't want to prolong the meeting, but I do know something about the stanchions that were on 5th near St. Peter's. And one of the things about 5th Avenue is there's no line.
Correct.
And because there's no line, there's not an easy guideline. I think when there is a line, a stanchion on a line is more prominent.
Yes.
It alerts the driver to the fact that they should not be crossing wildly left in the road. And but I just want to share that because
What we did at that location, after our signs got hit several times, because depending on how badly they get struck, sometimes you can save the base usually. Unless it gets a full impact, you can usually save the pole. The signs that are fixed to them usually are gone after an impact or two. And in order to prolong the life of them, we even set out, we couldn't paint the roadway up there, but we did set, as a temporary measure, we set traffic cones in advance of each of the pedestrian crossings. So the traffic cone, if nothing else, would serve as a three-dimensional identification to a north or southbound motorist that there was something in the roadway in advance of the pedestrian safety stanchion. And we lost cones and signs at that location.
Well, Chief, we appreciate your input. I don't know how the council is going to vote on this particular resolution, but if I were you, I would order the stanchions for these 9 crosswalks.
Said one other thing.
Kathleen?
I know recently a Bergen County community was awarded significant money as a grant to do this. Is it something that we can pursue as well?
Sir, I will certainly work with our grant writer to see what is available in terms of that. I mentioned to the mayor last week, I've already earmarked some funds in my operating budget for traffic signs to make sure that the money is available, potentially put that into effect this year. And as I mentioned to the whole council, I will work with the engineer's office to make sure it's done as safely as possible.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. We have 2 items on the work session consent agenda. 3? The Green Team application, the resolution authorizing our tax appeal attorney to enter into a settlement, and a resolution amending the contract with tax appeal attorney Alan Spinello. Can I have a motion and a second to move those consent agenda items?
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. Any unfinished business?
Me, sure.
I'm calling for any unfinished business. Any unfinished business in the work session? Okay. Any new business in this work session? All right, I'd like to open the hearing to the public on the work session agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Polici here.
Did we do our business?
Yeah, when is Mr. Pucci on the agenda?
Yeah, he's here for discussion.
Oh, number 1. Okay.
Number 1 in our heart.
Mr. Pucci, come forward, please. I skipped right over for discussion.
Good evening.
Hello.
I was here at the last meeting to discuss the library roof. I submitted to the mayor and council a brief report on my findings and a budget estimate. I just wanted to know if there was any questions because time was not available for any kind of discussion at the last meeting. And then I could speak to you this evening about the DPW roof, which I did another analysis on and a budget estimate on replacing that roof.
Al?
With regard to the library roof, is that, in your estimation, a project that can be broken into parts? And if it was broken into parts, what would that do to the cost? Would it increase it if you did one section this year, another section the next year?
I think it would cost you more at the end of the day to break it up into phases. That's the question. because you would have to mobilize for, 3 or 4 different times. Also, I don't know if a manufacturer, a roofing company would take the responsibility of just designating a certain patch, and maybe there's some manufacturer's warranties that would not be valid. And then also, if you had 3 different contractors to make all those roofs together, I think probably there's value, because it's 15,000 square feet. I think there's value probably because the job is substantial enough to get some good pricing. And I would probably put this out there in the spring. I think right now, I think the timing is not going to be suitable because we're going into the bad weather. So I think we can get the documents ready, the specifications prepared, the bid documents completed, and send it out to bid with a spring bid, and just test the water to see what kind of pricing you would get back. I think that would be my recommendation. In the spring, it might be that the economy is still not 100% and people are looking for jobs, and I think you would get a better price in the spring out of the box. At least that's my personal feeling. The building is kind of flat. I don't know if you've ever been up on that roof, but it's contiguous. It's not like there are parapet walls or offsets where we could break it at a wall. There was a series of 3 additions, I think, to my recollection, that were done there, and it's one large plane. The only extension out of that roof is the clear story, and that's roofed with conventional shingle, fiberglass shingles, and that's faring well. We're not going to touch that. That actually looks in pretty good shape. It's just the other parts that are really failing because of that EPDM system, that rubber system. The joints are failing, and there are numerous patches on that roof, and it's really outlived its usefulness. So it really should be done as a continuous or a contiguous surface, and I think you would get the benefit of the warranties, like 25, 30-year warranties, and call it a day.
Mr. Policia, did you give us an alternate cost estimate for replacing the membrane roof with the membrane roof, maybe a little thicker, a little more, a little better quality?
We could go into a heavier duty EPDM. It's just that the membrane roof is a single layer. And I think that if there's a failure and you puncture that layer, you don't have any redundancy. The roof that I had specified is a multi-layered roof. It's more of a conventional built-up roof. And it has redundancy in it, and it moves and expands a lot better than these EPDM roofs. I have talked to various consultants, and also manufacturers, and really with the technology of EPDM, it's not really conducive because you'll have failure at the seams. And even if we went to a 90 mil, which is a pretty substantial, it's almost like 1/8 of an inch thick, there have been problems with these roofs shearing and the joints opening up. The roof that I specified is a multi-layered roof. Also, I'm calling for more insulation to meet the energy code, because I think you want to address this issue, because there are areas of the roofs that do not meet energy efficiency. So that's why that building is working extra hard in the summer and in the winter to keep temperature. So that's another factor. So I would probably stick to a built-up roof if I had my
Thank you.
choice.
Ed?
It's probably a question better directed to John Lynch, or maybe Kathleen knows. What's been the status with the leaking? Has it been consistent?
They've been
Has it
able
gotten
to
worse?
kind of keep it at bay, because obviously they have the new carpet there, and, they don't want
That's right, yeah,
to,
so-
want to protect it. He's just been keeping it at bay. He says, it's kind of...
Has it been leaking, do you know, or is it it's still
Leaking.
But it's a localized area
Yeah.
still?
All right, any other questions on the library before we move on to the DPW?
Okay, DPW. I have some reports I can pass out.
I know what's happening.
Thank you.
Anybody's got one?
The DPW roof, it's a building about 12,000 square feet. It's about 2 stories in height. It services the DPW fleet and also stores that fleet and also tools. There's a garage in there, and there's offices for the DPW. It's a metal roof. It's a steel roof, actually, and it's about 30 to 35 years old. I've been trying to ascertain drawings on that structure, but we haven't found them yet. The construction of the roof is metal pans, and basically to the high point of the roof, it's a sloped roof. When it was constructed, 2 pans came together and there's a seam. And what happened is that they attached these metal pans at the lower end and the higher end and let that joint slip in between for expansion. However, that joint has been moving quite frequently and allowing rain water to get inside of it. Also, when it was constructed, the flashing systems that were used at vertical walls and penetrations was not that really sophisticated, and this has allowed water to enter into that building. This building exhibited a high amount of corrosion because it is steel, and the salt shed that's adjacent to the DPW building does not help the situation at all. Actually, that salt shed is a saline environment which gets moisture that goes through it and brings that moisture and that saline up on that roof. So if you drive by the DPW roof, you'll see that the edges and some of the roof pans are starting to deteriorate heavily. They almost look like spider webs because of the deterioration. And that's caused from that corrosion from the saline or the salts and the even from the waterway that's behind it. You have a drainage area back there. So that combination accelerates this corrosion on that roof. The skylights were a good idea in the initial design. However, they weren't detailed right because the fenestration doesn't have enough curve from the roof plane to the glass. So these dormers we use for ventilation requirements and to get natural light back in that garage. However, the height of the roof at that point is more conducive for snow to dam up and build up, causing leaks. and corrosion on these skylights, as shown on the first page of my report. Those dormers are really too close to the surface of the roof. They should have been higher up. At one time, we had discussed with DPW removing them, but I don't think that's a good idea. I think you can need them for natural ventilation and for natural light. I think maybe removing the bottom panel and creating a series of louvers with some fixed glass would be an appropriate solution. If you turn to page 2, you could see some of the details that are creating havoc with this present system. The rusting, the thermal expansion of the panels, creating separation in the pans. On page 3, you could see the proximity of the salt shed near the main DPW building. And also in the bottom right-hand corner, the dormer and the actual glass sitting, only 3.5 inches from the main roof. It should have been at least a foot of curving there for flashing. My recommendation for mediation of this problem would be to put a new metal roof over this present roof. The existing structure is sound, and basically they have developed a system, these metal roof manufacturers, that it's a crossbar, and on page 4, I think it's page 5 actually, I show in the middle of the page a system where they put a horizontal perpendicular to the existing roof pans, and they fill those with insulation, with rigid insulation. So now you're getting the benefit of a new roof and some additional insulation value, and then this rigid insulation adds to the structural integrity of that roof, so you can walk on it for repairs or for additional work. The roof that I'm thinking about would be aluminum or stainless steel, but I think stainless steel will be prohibitive in cost. So I would go to a heavy gauge, probably like an 050 aluminum, that would alleviate the corrosion factor. This building, is a very important building, I think, for the town. I don't think you can reconstruct this building. It would cost you probably $6 to $8 million to rebuild this building. The roof probably has gone through its most useful life cycle, and it needs a new roof. I think removing this roof or going with conventional built-up or modified roofs would not make sense. I think a metal roof, an aluminum roof, or if you wanted further longevity, a stainless steel roof would be probably my first recommendation in this case. Preliminary cost estimates that I projected is about $430,000 to $485,000. It's expensive, but there's a lot of roof area, and that would include redesign of these dormers to make them functionally proper and to make them weather tight. So, I don't think moving the salt shed is going to be necessary. I think you can keep it there as long as we went to a non-corrosive material up on that roof. It's a matter of, what materials were chosen initially. A steel roof was chosen, and it did not fare well. I think what happened 30 years ago, the technology was not so good as far as the finish goes. So what happened with that steel finish is that through UV and wear and tear, that finish slowly but surely wore off the steel. And I think that the salt shed probably added or advanced that corrosion level. So that's why now you have leaking of joints, you have failure up at these dormers. I think the construction of it initially was like a prefabricated building. It was very unsophisticated. And I think through the years, what happened here is that the DPW added air conditioning, heating for the garage, and these penetrations that were added were really not done properly or by maybe competent workmen. And I think that aggravated a lot of these penetrations and caused the failure and the water infiltration coming into the garage, into the offices, into the service base. So at least there is a fix. I think just to remove that roof would be astronomical, and I think to go over it would be probably the best way to do it.
All right, any questions for Mr. Police and Anthony?
Yeah, other than the two roofs that you mentioned, the stainless steel and the aluminum, are there any other composites, or even, I know with residential roofing there's even sprays or covering sealants than putting on another metal roof?
I looked at some plans a while ago performed by another architect who was looking at this, where they were going to spray some foam on this roof. I think it's a Band-Aid. I'm trying to look for something that would give you longevity. A lot of manufacturers, I think you could probably get something out there for maybe a fix, like 5 years or something like that. But I don't think any roofing manufacturer would give you some longevity to a warranty. I think that the building was built 30, 35 years ago. It is the only roof that I believe that has been on that building. There's a good deal of corrosion. I think that any kind of other system would probably fail. I think a metal roof, just to cover it with a new skin, I firmly believe that that's something that you would get value for at least another 30, 35 years. I think you would get the warranties and protect the infrastructure of this building, because it is a valuable building and something that you don't want to replace in the future. So I think the investment is worth it to do it properly.
Kathleen?
Initially, your plan was to remove the dormers. Why did you go and change that this time?
It wasn't my plan. I think the borough or DPW wanted them removed because they're a water source. However, if you do remove them, you cut out the ventilation and the natural light into the garages, which I think is valuable. Also, they provide ventilation as a code requirement because you have diesel fumes and you have combustion in those garages. So to me, I don't think you can eliminate them. I think they're a nice architectural feature. I think they were designed for a purpose. I think they can be recycled. I think I would just bring up the curb line or the wall line and make a narrow strip up on top. This way we can exhaust the fumes and maybe allow for some natural light to get into the space, because it is like a cave in there. So I would not mess with that. Also, if you look at the structure, the structural steel actually looks like it's all interconnected, and to dismantle that would be an added cost, because now you have to do demolition and bear the additional cost of removing them and then creating a new framework to fill in that void. So to me, it doesn't make too much sense to do that. I'd rather spend the money, or rather advise you, the mayor and council, to spend the money on correcting these defects and benefiting from them instead of doing more demolition. I think it would even increase the costs.
The other question is, with this salt container, you said that it has contributed to the erosion of the roof. So should we do something to, what can we do so it doesn't happen again? Do you have to move that? Is there something you can put in front of it?
If we choose to go with a non-ferrous metal, like aluminum or stainless steel, the salt shed could stay where it is, because the aluminum is not really affected by the salt. The steel is. If you chose another steel product, I think it's going to be a problem.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, Mr. Felicia. We do have some other business to discuss, a ordinance. I want to thank you for appearing here and giving us your report. We can digest it, and then decide which project we want to undertake first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy.
All right, there is a draft ordinance to rezone a portion of Park Avenue to allow duplex housing. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the ordinance, to make comments, to suggest changes, or to move it to place it on the agenda for a first reading at our next council meeting?
Mayor, if I may, the ordinance that you have in hand, I believe was provided by Mr. Barrett, and I was hoping Sam would be available to provide comment on it tonight. So, you want to hold off on this a little bit later, or Mark's prepared to address it at this point?
I do. Sam did actually provide me with the letter he wrote to Mr. Barrett. Sam did make two or three changes to the ordinance as drafted. The revisions that Sam made were basically on height and height, driveway, and say height. He wants it to be limited to 2.5 stories, 30 feet inclusive of the garage elevation. So from to the actual roof ridge line would be 30 feet from the bottom. He wanted the garage to count as a story. I don't know if he actually provided. Did he provide these comments too?
Denise, do you remember seeing an email on that?
No, we don't remember seeing it.
So we don't have it at this time.
Okay. He did change. That was the one change he did make, and the only other change was he delineated a driveway requirement on the curb cut. Should only be no greater than 32 feet. No more than one curb cut shall be permitted for servicing both duplexes. And the paved driveway servicing each duplex shall not exceed 16 feet in width and shall terminate 8 feet or more from the side lot lines. So, and then Sam also wanted a 3-foot, let's say, landscape barrier right down the middle of the two driveways, just so you don't have an environment where you have one driveway, let's say one flat driveway encompassing both garages, so you don't have a million cars over there. He wants a little landscape buffer between the two driveways, right along the, terminating at the front property line. These two revisions that Sam proposed were all acceptable to Mr. Barrett as well as the developer. So they do not, Sam just wanted the mayor and council to know that they are acceptable, and he just at this point wanted to know whether or not they should be, it should be sent out for a, on the next agenda for the first reading. But he mentioned also, should it be sent down to the planning board? So I didn't know if it goes to this board for a first reading, or does it just go straight down to the planning board?
I'm not sure myself, we can make that determination and then direct it appropriately.
I think what we did with the development on the condominium project on Kinderkamak Road is that we adopted the ordinance on first reading, we sent it to the planning board. Planning board gave us back their recommendations, and then we did a final adoption.
I think that's what Sam had in mind as well.
Is that
what we did.
your recollection, Ed?
That's what we did, yeah.
Okay. So, how do we want to proceed? Do we want to ask Sam to incorporate his modifications into a proposed draft to be put on for first reading?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd make the motion that we put it down for first reading, subject to the revisions that Sam has made.
Okay.
I'll second.
And there's a second.
Mhm.
Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, Denise?
Councilwoman Murphy?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Councilman Paula?
Yes.
Councilman Vignone?
Yes.
Councilman Bartoloni?
Yes.
And Councilman Papaleo?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for bringing the modifications to our attention. We're moving forward on the rezoning of that part, on your lots on Park Avenue.
Mayor, we have to go to public meeting.
Yes, we have to go into the public meeting real quickly. Let me just open the meeting to the public so I can comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is open to the public. We will open the motion to the public again when we begin the 8 o'clock meeting. I know that there's people in the audience that wish to be heard. Before we take a vote on the resolutions regarding pedestrian improvements along Kinderkamak Road, I will open the public before we take the vote on those resolutions, so we can hear from the public and get their input. Can I have a motion to close the meeting to the public, the work session only?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn the work session?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are going to go back to the work session for